Now, I'm elated to be here and really glad to partake in this mini interview, and hopefully I can shed my own wit, wisdom, and ingenuity on what truly makes a father. So oftentimes when I'm queried on what true fatherhood is all about, or what transitions or shifts one from being a male to now becoming a man, or going from malehood to manhood, truly, I always love to transport that question back to Barack Obama's speech that he gave, I believe in 2008, when he was then Senator Barack Obama. And when Senator Barack Obama gave this highly enlightened elocution and exposition on men, it was one of his finest speeches, and I think in his canon of speeches is perhaps one of the greatest ones, or one of the most profound ones. In this elocution that he gave to a congregation of men, what Barack Obama enunciated to the men that day, and I'll give a summation of one of the most poignant singular lines from that message that he said, is that true fatherhood does not end at conception. True fatherhood begins at conception. Powerful point, right? What Barack Obama was trying to enumerate and enunciate and deploy and parlay to the audience of men that day is that true fatherhood is not a temporary engagement, it's an eternal engagement. True fatherhood is not something that's transient, it is permanent. And really what Obama was speaking to at that point in time, and why that message was so poignant and something that has lived on since that moment in time in 2008, is because there is a malady or a conundrum that is happening within the black family. And we all know that family is one of the most important sociological and anthropological institutions that we have in our society, because when we have a strong family, we can have a strong social society. And what was Obama really speaking toward, or what was he parlaying toward? He was parlaying to this conundrum in the black community, or across several families, where there's an absenteeism of fathers. And why is that? There's really two ways you can look at it, or there's really two facets in which you can look at this conundrum. But one facet, you can look at it from the American sociological order purview, vantage point, in which the American sociological order has placed in policies, has placed in laws, has placed in institutions to thwart and foil the black family from growing by taking away black men. So we do know that in the 1960s, during the civil rights movement, where there was a lot of progress in terms of civil rights, we also know that there was also cancer within those civil rights bills, because those civil rights bills, as we transitioned in the 70s, created these welfare programs that instituted that in order for families to become strong, they had to discard the men within that family. So what happened was that social workers, oftentimes when they were coming into black families, they wanted to ensure, if we're going to give money and fiscal responsibility to these women, we have to ensure that the men are not around. And truly, that created a context where men became irrelevant to the black family. Not only that, in the 1970s, you had the rise of mass incarceration, the war on drugs. And what happened was that the American sociological order took away the jobs, took away the industrial training from the homes. That really created economic castration from the black man. And if the black man can't find a job, if the black man can't find livable wage, they became socially irrelevant to their black spouse. And what has happened, of course, with these laws placed in by the American sociological order has created that social degeneracy. But I also want us to look at it from this vantage point, or look at it from this lens as well, that we also can't just engage in victimhood, but also the absenteeism of black men within our societal culture is also a responsibility that black men must take themselves on. We have black men that have become shiftless. We have black men that have become absent in leadership. We have had black men that have become absent in being role models for boys and those who are trying to figure out their own ontological identity in becoming a man. And we all know that in the American sociological order, to destroy a man, you destroy him as a boy, so he never develops into a man. Okay, let me pause on that. To destroy a man in the American sociological system. You destroy him as a boy so he never gestates into becoming a man. So really with this, advice and counsel that I often render and deploy to men, and specifically I want to speak to my own cultural context, black men, that we need to learn how to transition from malehood to manhood, because everybody is born a male, but not everybody becomes a man. So in the same form and fashion as my father, I want to deploy and parlay 3 C's, erudite C's, that I truly believe if one wants to transition from malehood to manhood, from going from being a boy to a man, these 3 C's need to be embodied and manifested into one's own psyche and cognitive bandwidth. So what are these 3 C's? The first C is the C of constructive. Constructive men construct themselves to be prolific exemplars. Oh, come on now, let me say that one more time. Constructive men construct themselves to be prolific exemplars. We don't need average men, we need prolific men. We don't need mediocre men, we need prolific men. We don't need men that are docile to being average, to being mediocre. We need men that are docile to elevating, that are docile to engage in being prolific. Because when we have prolific men, we can have prolific men that mentor prolific young boys. We can have prolific men that turn around the current tide in America that has a vendetta against black boys in order for them not to fully gestate. We need men that are prolific entrepreneurs, prolific in their field of calling, prolific in their communities. We need prolific men that will rise up to the occasion, because we all know that this role model ethic, if persons want to become and actualize into their own ontological identity and find their own existential purpose, we know that one needs to have an intimate acquaintance with greatness. They know that one needs to have an intimate acquaintance with a person that looks like them. So we need our men who are prolific, who can be prolific role models in order for them to help those that are struggling with their own identity in becoming a man. Help those young boys who are in households where there are no fathers. Help those who are trying to find men who can speak to their conscience and gain existential purpose about their own lives. We need men that can share their own phenomenological experience to ensure we have strong men within our society. So constructive men construct themselves to be prolific exemplars. But then the second C that is poignant, cardinal, and indispensable in one gestating and secreting from malehood to manhood is the C of civic. Civic men face calamities with equanimity. Oh, come on, somebody. Civic men face calamities with equanimity. Civic men within our societal culture, when they are faced with a slew of obstacles, when they are faced with a slew of burdens, when they're going through some social or psychological bane, when they're going through a sociological distress, when they're going through sociological disenchantment, when they're going through a sociological debacle, we need men that will still have equanimity in the midst of their calamity. And what more importantly, and what's more cardinal that I want to deploy, is that we need civic men that when they face these calamities, they can export that anger into something that is useful. They can wield it into something that is useful, right? What is going on within our social culture today? And though I love humanity, don't get me wrong, but I want to speak toward the black men. We have black men that are being brutalized by the police. We have black boys that are being over-policed by those that are supposed to protect us. We have black boys that are being miseducated. We have black boys that are deliberately being juvenile adjudicated. We have black boys that are going through social degeneracy, through drug dependence. We need black men who can export that anger, transport that anger into a civic responsibility and fight against that injustice. Engage in civil disobedience. Engage in a political process to ensure we can have a society that is not indicting these men, these boys with frivolous crimes, but we have these men who have a community-based ethic to stand up against injustice. Because civic men, when they face calamities, they have a resolve of equanimity. We need civic men that don't turn a blind eye to injustice, but confront injustice. Then the third and final C that I want to enumerate and deploy to all the men, and how one can transition from malehood to manhood and become that paradigmatic figure within their community. That third C that is highly critical is candid. Candid men don't solely focus on their exterior aesthetic. Candid men focus on their interior aesthetic. Oh, oh man, I'm loving this interview. And let me say that one more time, because that axiomatic statement, there's a lot to unpack in it. It's bite-sized. There's a lot to unpack from that axiomatic statement. It's a powerful axiom. Candid men don't solely focus on their exterior aesthetic. They also focus on their interior aesthetic. What am I trying to enumerate and deploy with that bite-sized nugget? That we need candid men that are not focused on the garb that they cloak themselves with, but focus on the inner qualities that makes one a true man. Why? Because in our societal culture, it has almost become fashioned and normalized to embrace a machismo ethic, a machismo ontological identity, which I believe is not always harmful. I do believe in what are these machismo identities? Being overly aggressive, being hypersexual, being hyper violent. And of course, these are oftentimes caricatures that are deployed by the American sociological order, because we know that in order for the American sociological order to divide a cultural milieu, you have to divide as men. You have to create schisms. You have to dichotomize and balkanize the men. But what I want us to really engage here, that though these machismo identities are sometimes useful, sometimes are needed in one's arsenal and inventory in order for them to meander through this social labyrinth, engaging in those forms can also be detrimental, because we can also create a patriarchal cultural climate, and that's not something that we want to engage in. So the true identity, the true interior aesthetic that a man must focus on is transitioning from a machismo identity to true masculinity, where one can embrace their emotions, where men can embrace in their own authentic voice, where men can share their frustrations in a healthy way, their anger in a healthy way, where men don't have to conceal their own feelings and their own emotions. We want a society where men don't always have to look tough, but men can also shine that shortcoming that they have within their own psyche. We need that created within our social context as well. So what I'm calling for, because at the end of the day, in order for us to ensure that we're graduating males into manhood, they need authentic communities, because personal growth does not happen in an inauthentic community. It happens in an authentic community. So we need candid men that solely won't focus on their exterior aesthetic, but will also focus on their interior aesthetic, transitioning from the machismo identity to true masculinity that is incompassive, or that is a composite picture of sharing emotions, being authentic, and being vulnerable. I believe that is what really makes a true man. So in the form of my father's vitamin C's, I just want to quickly recap on this in case anybody missed it, or in case you had to skip through all of this as well. Is that number one, in order for one to graduate from malehood to manhood and truly embrace what it becomes in being a true man. And remember, I say a true man because there's a lot of men out there, but we need a true man out there. Number one, constructive men construct themselves to be prolific exemplars. Number two, candid men don't solely focus on their exterior aesthetic, but candid men also focus on their interior aesthetic. And then number three, civic men face calamities with equanimity. I believe with those three C's, that can graduate one from malehood to manhood in order for us to stop the social degeneracy that is destroying our boys into becoming men. So that's pretty much what I can say within this short interview. And I hope persons that are listening will be able to take the wit and wisdom, ingenuity that I was able to furnish and be able to apply to themselves. Because when we have strong men within our communities, we can have a stronger society. So that's all I pretty much have. So, okay, I need to give them the final blessings. To all the fathers today, and I also want to say a special happy Father's Day to my father out there, who has been that paradigmatic figure out there. But to all the men out there, to all the fathers out there, I want to wish you all a happy Father's Day.